Okay, we're back to our public hearing after having recess earlier this morning. Um, we have with us the executive director, Betty Terlay, and her CUC team, as well as um, joining us further is Chairman of PUC, Attorney Jim Sarak, and we thank also the Chairman of PUTC from the House, Chairman Vince Odan, who's happy to join us, working together with the Senate Committee on PUTC. So we'll just go on and acknowledge the executive director for her testimony, or if you have any comments on Senate Bill 2329 SD1 or as originally introduced. Go ahead, Director.
Good afternoon, Chairman, the UTC, and honorable members, Senate members. We're kind of caught a little off guard because we didn't get the notice. So just want to put on record that we realized at the end that they have the email addresses incorrect. So I think that's squared away as of this just before lunchtime. And so hopefully for the next hearing, we have more time to put this on our schedule so that we could prepare a little bit for whatever's on the agenda. Today I have with me our, first of all, I'm Bettina Terlahi, the acting executive director for the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation. To my left is Kevin Watson. He's the deputy executive director for water and wastewater. And to my far left is our acting chief engineer, Nicolette Villagomez. Enos. To my right is our acting finance officer, Mr. Rodolfo Urbano. And I have a couple of other people in the room with us. Our acting water manager, Bernard Kirmius in the red, and in the blue is our wastewater supervisor, Carson Marangar. Yes, with us. Thank you, and I believe that the agenda today was to discuss the separation of the powered water entities into two separate corporations, and so we'll answer as best as we could. Again, we did not prepare anything formal for the Senate, but we'll be more than happy to provide information or give you our opinion this afternoon.
Okay, I know that earlier this morning we were flexible to go over questions with regards to CUC in general, but and I hope that you can, I guess, address some of those questions. But before opening it up to the members, I guess just your immediate impression or concern or recommendation or your opinion on Senate Bill 2329, if you have any, or any of your staff. Thank you.
I can begin, and then I will defer over to Mr. Watson, who may have additional input on that, or perhaps his own opinion, as we have not collectively assessed this as a team to come up with an opinion for CUC. I don't specifically have an opinion on the matter whether it's the right thing, the right way to go or not. I believe that either way, there are a lot of pros and cons on both sides. And I think it's a matter of weighing out the pros and cons of splitting the entity into two. And, what are the pros and what are the cons? And we have to weigh that together and see, which would benefit the CNMI more. There are some concerns we have, as we have discussed, this over the years. For example, if we are to do this, there has to be some sort of capital or infusion, because we'd have to split a lot of the assets or even the entity itself. Right now we are, one of the pros of keeping it together is that we are saving with regards to a lot of centralized functions. We have one director, one board, one human resources, one accounting department, one IT, and it can go on and on. We have a lot of other functions, customer service. Road and Tinian too is one entity with both services as well as Tinian, if I said only Rhoda. And then there are cons too, like having to be able to just focus on one entity over the other. In the case of shared resources, like the director, human resources is processing more job vacancies than they need to. So again, it's weighing out the variations that set the advantages and disadvantages. Uh, One thing to note is that because we are one corporation, and even though we track all of our expenses and our activity as separate entities between power, water, and wastewater, and we do that because the rates have to reflect power alone, water alone, and wastewater alone. But when there's struggle in one entity over the other, then another entity rescues that temporarily until it could give back to the other entity what it borrowed. So in the past, we have done that where power subsidizes the water, because, and we even had to go through CPUC to get that approved. So as for regulating, I mean, other than the fact that we're in one building, I think this would just put us in three separate, buildings perhaps, and three different general managers. But I think at the end of the day, it just may add more indirect costs because we'd have to then have more resources. And where do the assets go? Do we split it up by power gets certain percentage, water? I mean, these are the things that we're going to have to do up front when the time comes to actually separate the entities. We have shared vehicles, we have shared systems, and they're not, very easily procured. They're costly. The billing system, example for utility, can range about 5 million, and that's something that we share amongst three because we just use one. So these are some of the factors that I think, and unfortunately, I don't have that broken down to even give you a dollar amount perspective. And so I will yield to Mr. Watson as the wastewater expert. He might have his own say in how this benefits as water, wastewater, or not. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Kevin Watson, and I guess how I would look at it is based on the experience I had for the last 20 years in California. And in California, there there is a law where you keep the uh, enterprise funds, is what we called them, water separate from wastewater and separate from power and separate from the general fund, which would be same as public works here. And we still had a centralized mayor and council that was elected. We had a city manager and HR manager that was over all the divisions and departments, from fire department to police department to water and power and wastewater. Uh, that was an efficient way to operate it. I think the way CUC's modeled here is similar in that you, as Betty pointed out, we have a central HR and accounting. So if you separate it totally, it is going to drive the cost up. Uh, and those costs would be passed down to our consumers. There would be no way around it. We have to, as managers, look out for and try to keep the rates lowest for our customers. And by splitting it up into two and having two HR managers and two accounting divisions, wouldn't be an efficient, in my opinion, way to run the business. And so that's my point of view on it.
Since we have you, can I just ask you on the election part aspect, because that's also the main change here, is to have a board of director that is elected. What is your sense? Any of you want to comment on that side, on that particular provision?
Myself, I'm used to working under an elected board or elected city council.
Sir, how long have you been working at CUC?
I've been with CUC since February of 2023.
Okay, so you've got a sense already of what transpired over the years.
Yes.
So, based on the information you've gathered since taking over. By the way, what is your position at CUC
The deputy executive director of
for water?
water and wastewater.
So there's a deputy executive director for power and deputy executive director for water.
No, sir. There is a created deputy director, not a deputy executive director, just a deputy director for power, to help run the power side. But the deputy executive director is for water wastewater is a stipulated order required position that is right under the executive director.
So let me step back. Okay, can you describe who's the head of water and power and what's their title today, or explain?
The executive director is the highest management position that reports to the board. And there's a deputy executive director for water wastewater who is in charge of the water and wastewater operations, as well as the stipulated order requirements. He is the lead in that role. He also oversees the engineering for water and wastewater, which is where the planning, design, and project management happens. Then there's a deputy director, which is vacant right now, for the power, that oversees the power operation, power generation, and the renewable energy. That is actually a position that has been vacant for so long until Dallas PV was hired in 2022. And then it's been vacant again since he left.
So you're saying there's really no one at CUC that has been keeping track of our, generators and
No,
planning?
we have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to answer too soon. We do have a power generation manager, that is Mr. Richard Cano, and he has his own set of engineers and supervisors, trade supervisors, and foremans. And then we have Lee Lieto. He is the power distribution manager, and he handles the T&D operation, which is where you have the line crew and the crew that goes out and does connections, new installations, the power lines.
Okay,
then
and
renewable
for
energy
so
is a fairly new division that
Oh.
currently has 2 engineers that are working projects on their own. Renewable energy. Yes.
awareness. Well, can we hear on the water? How does the structure work on the water side and the sewer, Mr. Watson?
Yes, I'm the deputy executive director over water and wastewater. We have a water and wastewater division manager who will be coming aboard on the 27th of this month. And we have a water supervisor and a wastewater supervisor underneath that position. And then direct responsible charge of treatment and distribution. Oh, and then also we have the engineering, water and wastewater. We have a total of 17 17 staff in engineering.
Okay, so I'm just gonna ask a random question. Let's say I come to CUC and I say, I want to find out about leakage in your pipe system. Who do I check?
Okay, that would be Bernard, who is sitting behind me. He's our water supervisor of the distribution, direct responsible charge. And he's also filling as the water and wastewater division manager at this time.
And it's
he would-
also responsible for records on like who's paying on time and who's not paying on time, or is that
is the billing department.
billing? You have to go to billing to find
Yes.
out. Okay. Well, I know that my members have questions in that area, so I'm just trying to see if you have the people here. So,
Chairman,
yes,
we'll be more than happy to give you an org chart if that would help.
yeah,
Yes,
please, can
we
you
can
provide
submit that,
us?
yes.
Yeah, and on the leaks, we also have an engineering tech team that are dedicated to leak detection and proactively looking for leaking pipes.
This question was asked earlier, should this bill be passed? I know that the issue of the transition is a big issue. If we have the same board operating, running the two corporation, what do you see as the transition concern there? If it's the same board and we're saying we're going to ultimately separate CUC, do you see any transition concern there immediately, other than the subsidy part?
The shared administrative expenses would be one concern. Again, like the human resources, well, how do we charge their expenses to power and water? I mean, right now we do that for allocation purposes. We do it for.
You do it now. We can get those documents, like how much you give power and water percentage.
We do it for our budget. We do that for our budget, yes. So
So you can provide us that
based
those
on the number
numbers
of
too.
employees, but not all the divisions are done the same way. We have an IT department. We have a procurement department. They handle all purchase orders and contracts. We have the accounting department. We have the customer services. We have the call center. We have the billing and collection. We have the treasury department. We have the grants department. We have the board office is under that board, under that one body. We have legal services. I might be missing a few others, but we have the water labs underwater. But these are all the right off the bat departments that are shared resources. Meter readers, for example, all their vehicles too, that are shared. So if we were to say today you're going to sever, then I need to know if the meter readers go with power or water, or we split them. We'd still need to hire more than for each division because it takes that much to read the routes. Their vehicles, again, we'd have to buy more vehicles. The assets that they use devices, technology devices to go out and read. Who will inherit that, the power side or the water side? We pay for the building as one, again, how do we split the building up? We have current grants for a building. Is that going to be for power or for water now? It will get messy unless we have some infusion right away to resolve those immediate items that need to be taken care of right away, so that it will allow for continuous, smooth operation.
Yeah. Okay, the director, can you comment on the election provision for the board of directors?
I see an advantage with the election. I also see the current situation of a non-election, how it is done. I on the election that allows the people to have a say of who is going to sit at the head of the corporation. Now, whoever sits up there, whether it's an elected person or the governor's appointee, we always want the best person to represent and be neutral and in the best interest of the Commonwealth. So either way it goes, that's what we want the body to represent. Is that they're doing it for the best interests of the entity and the Commonwealth, its customers. Whether elected is better than non-elected, um, I will have to say it could be, but it depends to who is going to run for that position, that office, right? Because if you don't have too many people wanting to run for that office, then you're giving us then the choices would also be concerning. In order for you to get really good qualified individuals to want to run for this office, they either really want to give back to the community as professionals, or there has to be a benefit for their time. As board members are volunteer professionals, and I know they do it for their community, but when you do it as an election, then you want qualified individuals who are going to come in and know what they're getting themselves into with regards to utility and the complexity of it. So it could be better. Again, it depends on the requirements that you're going to impose on how the individuals that are going to be candidates for the position, how stringent you're going to be on that. I think it should be, but if you're going to be elected, but what's the enticement to it is another concern.
Okay, I just want to point out that in the bill right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's 1,000 or 1,005 a month, which is very insignificant, but at least it gets you to, I guess, subsidize your basic costs in attending the meetings and spending time reading
Yeah.
the materials. But anyway, thank you. I'm going to allow the members to ask question at this point, and the chair will recognize any member. Senator Corina.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome CUC team again. Thank you for your time. I think I would start off by maybe addressing the question to the acting executive director and also the deputy. So I don't know how much of the bill you've had a chance to review in its entirety, but I would like to know whether or not this bill has any implications on the requirements on the stipulated orders 1 and 2. So if this two divisions should be severed, what are some of the potential implications that it may have on the stipulated orders, right? Because then I'm sure in this bill, I believe it addresses the transition period. So there will be a time provided to CUC to go through the transition. Obviously, it's not going to be instantaneously, right? So, but should this bill pass and become law, I'm curious to know what, if any, implications it would have on the SOs that CUC is currently trying to resolve and, take it off their hands, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGough. Yeah, my opinion would be, I think EPA would be very concerned because, again, it's about the resources that we currently have. It is challenging to get a qualified individuals based off the stipulated order requirements to fill some of the positions that we currently have vacant. As you can see, I'm in acting capacity. Mr. Dong is, and so is Nikki. So Bernard, that will be filled next week, and we're grateful for Mr. Watson for wanting to take on this role. And I think we've made a lot of progress since he's been here in February. So, EPA came and visited, and they're very pleased with what they've seen with regards to the movement we've been making recently. But the concerning part might be more of, again, the training that we have with, all divisions that, uh, again, will the regulations be the same? Right now, we are amending our regulations to satisfy one of the biggest, one big concern that EPA has, which is our procurement process. And so that's something that's being addressed right now. Um, I suppose wastewater is the bulk of the stipulated order. You know, for SO1, SO2 is on the power side, but it does have to do with, it's a combined, I guess, oversight from the same, team at EPA. But I really can't say how that's gonna. I don't think it's gonna impact each other. I mean, like power, the stipulated order 2 handles what it handles with oil management, and stipulated order 1 is water wastewater, which is all under Mr. Watson.
Perhaps maybe I should have clarified a little bit more. I guess where I was going with that is whether the implication that I was, referring to was whether or not the interruption, right, of the transition might delay some of the ongoing efforts or projects that CUC is working on in order to resolve, some of those the stipulated orders, right? So I guess that's where I just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and we are cognizant of some of the implications that it may impose on CC should this bill pass. So
There's definitely joint resources being used that would need to be split up. For example, on the stipulated order, with one of the things they're working on is, for example, bringing down the non-revenue water. Well, the billing department plays a big role in that, and is part of their what do you want to call it, a committee or task force that they work on swims. So again, we have one billing manager, if you'll say, that works with them. And where does she go? Does she follow the power or the water? And how do we determine which is, which takes the trained staff and which we have to hire new trained staff? It's going to be a challenge, that's for sure.
I would just assume that this would have some, if not a
Yes.
lot of financial impact, right, on both sides, because obviously you just stated earlier that the power division is subsidizing water and wastewater. So to break those two divisions into its own, obviously water is challenged right now in trying to sustain themselves financially, and thus the reason for um, power subsidizing. And while we're on that topic, Mr. Watson, if you could answer, is there a reason why power is subsidizing water at this point? And what is CUC doing to address that issue so that maybe perhaps in the future, if this bill doesn't pass at this point in time, that's something that could be revisited and reconsidered, if water can maintain and sustain its own operational costs.
May I make a correction? I use that as an example that power at some point was subsidizing water, but that's not the current status today. Just to make it clear.
Okay, just to clarify, because we had Jim in here earlier, and Jim, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I heard you say that in the last meeting, it was still the case that power was subsidizing water.
I'm not sure if I said that I got that information from the last meeting, but it's my understanding that the rates now that are currently in effect subsidize the water, cost of service of water. And I'm not sure now what the receivables are for water such that they would reach to the level of paying for the cost of service. But I know the current rates now that are in effect were put in effect to subsidize the fact that the revenue coming from the water wastewater side that was being paid wasn't enough to um, pay for the cost of service. So I would think that at some point in time there would have to be a rate increase on the water wastewater side to be able to get to that cost of service level.
Okay, so I guess let me restate it or reiterate perhaps. So is it accurate to say now then that the power division is no longer subsidizing water and wastewater for their operational cost?
Yes, that's correct, because we are receiving a lot of grants right now for water and wastewater. And so
For projects or for operational costs?
for projects, but when we utilize the same staff, then
Okay.
their labor gets charged to the grant. So right now, because of that funding assistance that we're getting,
So it's a temporary relief, I would say then. But if those grants were not there, realistically, water would probably still need help from power.
I would agree with that.
Okay. And then, because I guess where I was leading to that is because I believe, again, Jim, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the water loss is still at 60%,
What was the question?
the water loss.
Yes, it's around 60%. A lot of that is due to inaccurate meters. The condition of our water is very high in chlorides and total dissolved solids, which attacks a meter. Your in industry standard, your water meter would have high quality water going through it. Here in Saipan, we don't have that luxury of high quality water. So the water meter will lose its accuracy. You have a higher flow of water going through the meter, but the water that is being billed or being measured is much less than the true volume of water going through that meter. And it also attacks the pipes and causes leaks. So until, we are making efforts to determine where leaks are in the system and fixing those. When we find a leak, we send out a crew immediately. We don't wait 48 hours notice for a shutdown. We put out a public notice just today. We put out a public notice yesterday to make the repair this morning, and the repair was done by 10 o'clock this morning. Had we waited for 48 hours, we would have wasted 10,000 gallons of water because there's a leak of magnitude of 1 gallon per minute.
Got it.
And the other that we're finding is there's the system is old, and a lot of the pipes that we are discovering through other capital improvement projects with the sewer, for instance, in Garapan, we find water lines that aren't metered that's going to some customer. The customer may not exist right now. Maybe a business is closed. We are cutting and capping that line until such time that when a new business takes possession of a building and that building does not have water, at that time they will put in an application for water service and a meter, and it will be metered. We found several of these to be the case, and we've even found, even in our public schools, that not all the buildings are metered, and we are correcting that. We are instituting a new work order system, for instance, called non-revenue water and non-revenue wastewater. And that way we can correct these deficiencies in our system without waiting for somebody to put an application for a meter. We can go ahead and proceed and put in, for instance, where I use a school system as an example, we will put in a master meter, go into that school and all the water being used by the school will be metered and not just a portion of the school.
Great. Thank you for that update. Um, what percentage would you say the inaccurate meters attributes to the 60%? Like how much of that is due to that?
Okay,
the inaccurate meter?
to give you an example, I'd worked in, cities in California, and we had meter change out programs. And when we put new meters in, sometimes the amount of water registered through the new meter would increase by over 50%. And that's with a higher quality water. So
Okay, so, but based on what we have here on stipend, out of the 60% that's non-revenue loss, how much of that is attributed from the inaccurate meter?
my guess would be that it would be at least 50% due to inaccurate meters.
50%. And what is the 60% in value? Like how much is that in dollar value? What is 60%
That
in
is,
revenue loss?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Would your CFO know? How much is 60% equivalent? What is it in value?
I'm sorry, Senator, but I don't have the data right now.
What is the average or the prior years? So if water was supposed to generate, let's say $60 million projected, right? That's at 100%. 60% of that would have been 36.
For
Wait,
water, Senator, as of September 2023, the revenue was 12.9 million.
12.9 million. Okay, but I wanted to know how much. What does the 60 million represent? Just so that we know, we can look at the big picture, right, and see how much in lost revenue CUC could have been generating. Had all of that issues been resolved.
0.4, right?
So if it's 100 billion, they're not generating 60 million. Yeah, 60% is about. But that's
19 million. That's 60%.
I guess.
Say 17 and 19. So it'd be 17 to 19 million dollars. And we are currently working with a consultant for a water loss audit that puts that the volume or the amount of unmetered or water loss, gives it a dollar figure. That is not completed yet, but that will put a dollar figure on that.
So given that 50% of that 60% water in lost revenue, what are CUC's short-term and long-term plans to remedy that so that water can at some point start sustaining itself?
Okay, we are putting new water meters in our 15 reservoir sites going in and out. Each of those sites are serving what we label as TSAs or tank service areas. We will be able to know exactly what amount is being served in that area. We are linking that up with the billing meters, so we can see where to devote our efforts for leaks as well as inaccurate meters. We have invested 900 and some $1,000. It was paid through a grant for a new water meter efficient or test. And we are modifying the building now to install this system, and it will be able to test up to 20 household meters per each test. And it is computerized. We'll be able to get reports. We'll be able to analyze. We can do random meters test throughout the system and see what the accuracy is. And we also have a portable mobile unit that will be pulled behind a trailer that will be able to test the meters from 3 inches and above. We'll be able to go straight to the site where we don't have to remove those large meters from the ground. Those will also be able to test the meters at our tanks. And by doing this, we will be able to get a better handle on, when to replace those meters and when is it cost benefit analysis of replacing the meters, so that then the meters won't be left in the ground inaccurate and not collecting revenue.
And last question for me.
If I
Sorry.
if I may, can I add on? I'm
Sure.
not comfortable with the 17
Okay.
to 19 million, and that's because we did the calculation based off the current rates. If we were to calculate it, we'd have a better number in gallons,
Right.
but we wouldn't know what the cost is, because then that 12 million would be a different number if you were spreading the cost over 30 million worth of
Okay.
gallons, right? So
Yeah.
in other words, this is overstated because we're using the ratio at the 12.9 million,
Okay.
which is
Right.
covering the loss as well, right?
Okay. Thank you for that
Yeah.
update.
And I just want to add on to Mr. Watson, is that we have a test bench that's being put in.
Mhm.
Did you mention that already? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great news to hear that there's so many things being implemented to address the issue, right? And I guess my last question would be just what is the projected timeline to accomplish all of those tasks so that you can start seeing the results and the improvement on your revenues?
I'd say the meter accuracy bench test will be going into operation within 3 to 6 months, and we're putting a priority in expediting the meters for the tanks, and they're being designed right now. So we are wanting to expedite that because we see the importance and the benefit that we're gaining from that.
Thank you. I yield, Chair.
Just follow-up questions. Can you explain the 15 reservoir sites that you're planning to establish so that it can give you more accountability, right, on the water leakage? How does that work?
Yes, right now we have 142 wells in service, which each of them has a meter, and the reservoirs are going to have a mag meter, which the condition of the water will not affect those to the extent that it does a positive displacement meter that builds up the calcium and deposits. So there are more accurate meters that we're putting on the tanks. So we're have a truer knowledge of what we're actually producing. Right now, in several of our wells, those meters are, the flow has to be calculated or estimated because the meters have stopped registering and they have not been tested for accuracy in the past. So, and then by concentrating in a TSA or tank service area, say you have 1,000 meters being served under that one tank, and we produce 1,000,000 gallons at that tank, then we can match that up. If we're being billing 900,000 gallons versus the 1,000,000, we would know that somewhere our loss is 10%. So we can concentrate our efforts on doing some random meter accuracy test.
And when would this be completed?
We will have that completed within 12 to 18 months. The design has to go first, and then we will start rolling out the new meters. The meter accuracy bench test will be sooner. It will be within 3 to 6
3 to
months
6 months.
in operation.
Okay,
So we
and-
will be able to do the random meter tests throughout the city. Or
So we
throughout
have the
Saipan.
money for all of this, right? You have set
The-
aside funding for
Yes,
this?
we have some grants that paid for the meter accuracy test. That's already paid for. And we're doing the modifications to building here in Capitol Hill to put that in. It's the old Water Task Force building, and we're modifying it to fit the large test bench.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned about Garapan. You said you came across some businesses that are connected and they're not being metered.
Yes, we are undertaking a new sewer lines in Garapan, and in the excavation and putting in the new sewer lines, they discover water lines, and that's connected to our water mains, and they weren't metered.
How many such establishment do you think were not metered in Garapan?
Well, there's probably more than what we've discovered.
What
'cause
is
this
that? More than 10? More than 30?
more than 10.
Really?
Yes.
And while they're not paying, do they have a meter? Are they a customer at CUC for water? In other words, they probably have a metered water, and maybe because the piping and the building is old, they have water coming from an old pipeline. Is that the situation?
Well, the water pipe was coming directly from our water main, and it goes toward the buildings
Mhm.
without a meter.
Mm. And there's more than around 20 of those.
I'm not sure if there was 20, but it was more than 10.
And if the construction wasn't done, would what you're doing now be able to detect it in the future with your whatever testing that you're doing and the random testing and
That will not
catch them?
that won't uncover the pipes that aren't being that are going to buildings that aren't metered.
Mhm.
That's going to take a more in-depth audit with our billing department and with known accounts and a lot of footwork, because all of these lines are
Other than the
underground.
billing, though, I'm thinking more of like, your tests. Can you shut off their valve, the building,
They're-
and
they're-
then check if there's water flow in the building somewhere that's flowing when you shut off the valve? Is
Well,
there a system
only
like
if
that?
only if you know that building is unmetered. But if you have a straight pipe that doesn't have a valve, which is many times the case, is going to a building and the valve is at that building.
I think you
we
should do
have
that
no-
for the whole of Garapan, right? Shut them
there's-
down and then go building to building, right?
Well, that's why we have to do the audit with the building, knowing the usage and in that area.
So
And
are-
by the TSA, if we will have a known figure of a number of counts in that. And if it's 50% loss from what we're producing and we're only building 50, we'll have to concentrate our efforts more in that area. And when the water lines are below ground level, it's hard to determine accounts or buildings that aren't metered.
Yeah,
Because
because some
this-
of these owners, I'm sure they're honest, some of them, and it's just they don't know, right? Because they're just renting a space.
Exactly.
So
They probably don't know.
they probably don't know, right? So we need to find out, right? And how do we find that out? Knowing that there's a large number of establishment in Garapan, and those are your big businesses using a lot of water. So I hope it's not just the accounting, the billing that you're trying to find those. There must be some technical way of finding out more.
Yeah, and that's why we're creating a new work order system that we can go out and investigate it more in depth than just a application for a water meter.
Okay. And so, before I recognize another member, just following up on the leakage, if 60% was a figure of water leakage, okay, let's say 50%, what would that translate in terms of the water electric charge for that 50% that's gone? How much are we talking about as far as like the cost of power to produce the loss?
What the cost for the electric, this is water that we're speaking of. And a lot of that water is going through under registry meters, water meters, not electrical. Yes, there would be a savings in electrical for our pumps and motors that cost money to run the pumps through the electrical to pump the water.
Yeah, so what's a ballpark figure that we're losing?
And well, there's also not just electrical, but we're also talking chlorine chemical costs for treating the water and the man hours that it takes to pump that additional water.
So I guess that's what we're saying. The conservative estimate is 17 million. So I guess my question is, of the 17 million, how much is power there?
I'm not sure how much of that would be the power, but the people are going to be using the same amount of water through that unregistered meter, but their water bill is going to increase once they have a accurate meter going to their establishment or their home.
Well,
So
but
it's
the
not going to
overall
cost
cost,
any more money or save any money in electric. It's that the revenue will increase because we'll have accurate water meters.
or
And
the
it'll-
savings would be in efficiency in CUC translates to lower rates, charges, right?
It could, yes.
Okay, any member at this time? Let me ask if CHCC nothing stopping them from buying water at JG Sablan, right? Or from a private company where they're being charged residential, commercial rate, right? I'm sorry? They're being charged government rate rather. No, companies are being charged commercial rates. So nothing stopping CHCC from buying from a commercial water company today, right? I guess I'm just trying to say that we're going to be talking about another bill, but right now CHCC buys water from Saipan Water for their dialysis or for whatever usage they need, that means they can then pay commercial rate, right?
They would pay whatever the rate is
Uh,
from Saipan Water, which might be more,
Mhm.
but it won't be the government rate. They'll pay whatever rate.
or they'll
Saipan
charge
Commercial, yeah.
something onto that, right? But if they work out a deal, they can probably
they
get
can
that.
pay
I
whatever
guess
they
I'm just saying other dialysis companies are paying are being charged. The private ones are being
Yeah.
charged commercial rate. Well, CUC is getting government rate, right? Okay. Anyway,
But
just like to
if I
point
can
that out.
comment on that, Chair, while I understand the objective of that Senate bill is to relieve CHC of buying water, purchasing water, or being billed for water at the government rate, which is much, much higher than the commercial rate. But I would ask that there be some transition time so that we could get our rate case in, so that we could then pass the rates at the right rates for the commercial accounts, because that would impact the actual rate if we take CHC off the government rate or any other entity for that matter.
Mm.
Because then the rates would need to be revisited to make sure that we are now capturing what we're going to not capture from putting them on a commercial rate.
Okay, I just tossed that on the side. Let me recognize Senator Cruz at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Director, Mr. Watson. How many gallons of water again lost for CUC? Is that are you talking about for the entire cinema or just Saipan alone?
That I think that's the entire Zoom, is it, or just Saipan?
It's just
the 60%.
that is Saipan.
Okay, so how much water?
That's
How much? You have it in gallons?
per month. It's over 100 million gallons.
100.
100 million over.
Okay, is that every year or just 1 year?
That's 1 month.
1 month. Okay, so is that every month a loss
Yes.
of that amount?
Yes.
For how many years?
For as far back as I can see, I think they did a study back in 2013 or before.
So from that time, it's been detected there's a lot of loss, but not detected where's the loss coming from.
Yes, and that's why I'm telling you that much of it is not due to leaks, but due to inaccurate meters in our system.
So it's not a leak.
Not necessarily a leak.
It's is that
We do have leaks that we repair.
is that an accurate meter? Is that the one they called before smart meter?
No,
No, just wondering because I know that was mentioned back then that it was brought in smart meter, but consumer keep complaining that they're being charged so much money to pay, but the water that they're receiving are not
no.
accurate.
Now the inaccuracy is that it's not measuring the water that the customers are using, and the larger meters are could be very, very much higher.
So
For instance, the city I just moved from, we did a meter accuracy test on all of the large meters, 3 inches and above.
so
And when we tested those meters, they wouldn't even register a flow until it reached 25 gallon per minute. So you don't normally use 25 gallon a minute. So all the flow going through that meter that was less than 25 gallon a minute was not being registered as water usage. And that same case, I'm sure, holds true here in Saipan,
so
especially with the larger meters.
all right. So
Which is-
So wouldn't that be more alarming? That means more loss than is being reported, because if you're reporting, you're making so many hundreds of millions, right? And the meter is in reading that, and we still have losses. So that means there's more loss than 60%.
Not more than 50, because say, for instance, if we're using 90 or 900 some million gallons that's
so
being billed each month,
So
Yet we're producing 1,300,000. I'm just throwing that number out there.
Mhm.
That's about 50%. So that we're producing much more water than is being measured through the meters.
Okay, so you CUC knows where are these inaccurate meters or
That's
not
why
all?
we got the meter accuracy test, so we can start proactively looking for those inaccurate meters
Okay, so
and replacing them.
so you don't have any like main meter for CUC that will know which area are consuming more much
We-
of the water.
We will have that data once we have the new meters at each of the tanks and then the TSAs or tank service areas. And then we will also be testing the larger commercial and government meters that the 3 inches and above, that's more than likely not registering a flow until it reaches a high rate
Be-
of flow.
Because
through
I'm
that meter.
assuming not only inaccurate meter. I remember Saipan, they've been ration. There's hours that you shut off the main. Nowadays, it's all glue and PVC pipe. You can just do that in about an hour just to illegal tapping behind those or in any CUC main pipe. So have you ever detect any illegal tapping?
We have found lines that were tapped into our line that were unmetered, and we cut and capped them.
Okay, so that's part of those laws every month, right?
Yeah, can you repeat that question?
That's part of those every month loss of hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of gallons, right?
Right.
So, like I mentioned earlier, are, y- how are you guys going or going to rectify this? Are you going to put because I strongly suggest that you should have a main meter for different part of the island, so you will see which area are
Yes, that's what,
consuming a lot of, and that will be the first step to detect where are whether it's a
Exactly,
leakage or
that's-
inaccurate meters.
yes, that's exactly
Otherwise,
what
it's
we're
gonna take
doing.
time for you guys to detect all those where are those inaccurate meters, unless you guys survey all residential and see one by one. Because I've raised that question in the past, because I know that they have flat rate even with utility, and I don't know whether those are already upgrade and no more flat rates for any residential. Because if it's a flat rate, seriously you're gonna lose a lot of money for.
Yeah, we're eliminating the flat rate, unmetered.
There's no flat rate at this.
We're working toward eliminating it. I understand there might be 17 remaining that we're working on putting a meter in.
Okay. So do we have company that CUC service and doing some offset on you will be paying only $500 a month because of whatever service that they render and at the cost of the developer? There's nothing like that?
There, like I said, there was 17 remaining. That's approximately.
What I'm
that-
saying, at the cost of the investors, that CUC did not service that requirement, at the cost of the investor, they spend money, and then there's no offsetting by CUC that this investor or this business will be paying this amount because of whatever the offset, and that offset continues and never stop.
I guess the question
we
is,
don't,
why are these 17 customers getting flat rate?
we don't do offsets of utility charges with any investor or someone who's done contractual work. That practice was stopped a long time ago. But we do only have an agreement with CPA on up to a certain amount. It's not an, I think you're alluding to something that goes infinite. We cross their property, so we give them a free water consumption. We don't do that anymore. We stopped that bleeding in 2000, I want to say 11 or 12. And a good amount of those customers started to pay after we've resolved those issues. So,
Okay.
but we don't have any offsets. We do have CPA, an offset with CPA at the end of the year, but it's only up to a certain amount, and it's part of the agreement because of our wells being on their properties. And their argument is that the water is under their property, therefore they should only pay for the cost of pumping the water and not the actual consumption. So that's the agreement we have with CPA, but it's only up to a certain amount. And that agreement has only been in effect for 5 years, maybe about 5 years. Other than that, I know of no offset. And our acting CFO here has said we don't have any offsets.
Thank you. So what President Bo or Chairman Po was saying about why these customers are
17
giving
accounts.
a
These
flat rate?
accounts have been on our project list for some time. The water division, now that they're staffed up, and what they're doing is they're trying to investigate these 17 accounts. Some of them are very difficult to find, even how their water line is. And so, if you'd like, I could have Bernard explain on how difficult it is how challenging he is to find where they're, it's like trying to go into private property too and trying to get dig up so we could find where this connection's coming from. But they're getting water, so we charge an unmetered rate for now. But the goal is to eliminate unmetered rates. We at once had over 2,000, maybe more accounts on unmetered rates. So I think a lot more than 2,000. So we've come down to 17, and it seems to be the most difficult 17, but in many cases it requires backhoe digging and deep digging.
So this goes for power also?
With power, I am not aware of any unmetered power unless,
Rate for power?
yeah, I am not aware of any.
You don't
flat
have any
rate,
customer-
Unless it's a street light or temporary power where we calculate the load and they pay in advance. Other than that, I'm not aware of any flat rate for power. In one of the biggest findings that Mr. Watson was alluding to with regards to the water pipe, one finding was that one customer by the road had an unmetered rate being billed to them. So it was a good discovery because now we can put a meter in and bill them. But what we discovered when we disconnected that to work on it is that there were so many other customers behind that house that were getting free water by connecting to that house. We'd say that it is, but they were arguing that they were getting water from family because it was once a family lot. But if you're not paying a bill and you're getting services, the unmetered rate is by household. And so that's something that we're dealing with now, and how to go back and back bill them perhaps. So these are some of the things that are coming up. This road project has also uncovered one or two, more than that. Okay. I heard about the excitement in the beginning, but I guess as it's already over 10, the news just kind of says, I got to find out how much more, but they're good findings. But it's going to take a lot of resources to continue to do this in Yarapan because it's breaking roads and breaking ground, and it's going to cost a lot. But at the end of the day, at some point, we got to figure out. So we're going to survey our homes that have electric but no water, and we're gonna do that as well. Some you choose to use rainwater, and so that's why they don't have water. But we will survey and test occasionally to make sure that they're not using CUC water.
Director, Mr. Watson mentioned that for the last 13 years, right, we've been losing 100 million gallons a day in leak, but we're not going to look back. We're trying to prevent it from happening forward. What should we learn? Why did we drop the ball the last decade working on leakage, and we all know from before that that's our biggest major concern, right? So we didn't have a program before, or did we?
We did, but I think the leakages were outrunning the program because we have inherited a lot of old, old pipes, an old system. Now that we have more funding, and we're able to hire additional manpower to help with these works, it used to be customers wait to get connected because we have to divert to a large leak. And then when we're done with that,
By the
we
way,
have to go back.
I'm gonna use myself as an example. I applied 8 months ago to have water connected at this particular area. Up to now, there's no response, and they don't want to take the deposit or whatever. That's just a side. I just want to say that. But can we move on to CIP? What project is there or there that would then
Well, I was going to explain that we have a. Nikki, you want to explain the SWIMS program?
So good afternoon, senators. My name is Nicolette Villagomez, and I'm currently the acting chief engineer for the Water and Wastewater Department. So we do have it's called, and I had to write it down because it's a jumble of words. It's a sustainable water infrastructure management strategy program that CUC just put into place recently, and it's purely funded by EPA. It's an unprecedented time through the bipartisan infrastructure law that came in from the U.S. House. About $20 million additional for the next 5 years, total, or 30 million, 150 million on top of the state revolving funds that CUC is receiving on a yearly basis. And so this BIL grant is currently funding the SWIMS, what we like to call the SWIMS program, and it's a multifaceted approach to addressing non-revenue. And so we're doing right now we hired a consultant, GHD, to do a water audit based on the American Water Works Association standards. At the same time, we're also working on upgrading our mapping systems on CAD and GIS, looking at our old as-builts, ensuring that they are updated. And then also while we finish projects and as-builts are generated, we also incorporate that in. At the same time, we also have what Mr. Watson was saying about the metering. Our metering program. Our water comes from our wells up to the tank, and then tank to our customers. So this meter test bench will be able to test the accuracy of the meters coming out from the wells, and then the meters that are installed up at the tanks, and then also on the end user, our customers side. And we're also and part of that is to also to ensure that all our tanks, what's coming in from our wells going into the tanks, our inlets of our tank and our outlets have meters installed. And then from there, working on what we call district metering, going into, like, for example, a tank service area, like the Conatabla tank service area. It serves water to the Finasisu, for example, Finasisu down to Esperito Village. Putting in, installing water meters in different sections to see just how much water is being consumed, within the districts.
In other words, metering the distribution
Yeah,
system.
metering the
Yes.
distribution system. Yeah, so and the program has just started, and it's continuously evolving as we get more information from the audit and from our consultant. At least that's just for the SWIMS program.
And this is part of the stipulated order, just to
Yes.
note that it's complying with some of the stipulated order items. So we're being monitored that it's pushing through as it should.
Mhm.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
funding is coming out from them as well. So there's accountability on this program, a lot of accountability.
Yeah, and as we work on, for example, our GIS and CAD system, getting that updated, even going out into the field and spot checking to ensure that what's on our base maps are what is reflects that of the field. We also will be working on a leak detection program too. So once we get more information from the metering data that we collect, then from there we can really focus in the different areas where we see have issues.
So that's a lot of money, 30 million a year, right? Do you think that you can provide the legislature with a summary of your projects and the timetable?
Yeah.
And basically, most of the concerns right now are leakage, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it will go a long way if you can tell us how much is going to this project and that project, and uh, basically it's a summary of what it's going to address. And of course, you're going to come up with a total of at least 150 million, right? Just from the infrastructure money and you have other federal grants. I assume, Mr. Watson, your projects are not from this Biden infrastructure law, right? It's a other source of funding, grants. But whatever it is, the whole picture of the how are you CUC addressing the water projects and the leakage. I think that will go a long way in giving us some idea of where we're going. I think can I recognize Chairman Vince first before we go on? I think he's been raising his hand. Congressman Vince?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Because when we were doing the transition report, that's when we found out that, a lot of the issues that CUC was encountering was because of that, water loss, at the tune of 100 and plus million, that 60%. One of the things that we also found out that you guys only had at that time was what, 20 field technicians along that line, but yet you have like over 1,000 miles of piping that you guys have to take care of, and of course 20 people, working 24 hours a day. They would never be able to maintain or to even do regular proper maintenance on any system that is over 1,000 miles long. And so I do understand the conundrum that CUC is in when it comes to water and wastewater. And I'm just talking about water itself, not even the wastewater. The when I was looking at your org chart and I was counting how many field technicians you had less than 20 at one point, but yet you have thousands of meters that you have to maintain, and you have thousands of miles of water pipe that you have to maintain. So, but at the same time, I also know that under the stipulated order number one, you guys are required to provide a monthly report on your progress, does it not? So, what I'm trying to figure out, because with all of this issue that's happening, has any of the legislatures been provided that information so that they can figure out how to, calm down the masses out there that are footing the bill, and still at the same time trying to figure out how is it that CUC gets millions of dollars in funding every year through EPA, right? And then at the same time collects millions of dollars, from the ratepayers. But yet, over 10 years later, we're still, hanging under the stipulated order, one and two. I don't even want to go into stipulated number two, you know. So and that's what the people are trying to say. How can that be? The math that just doesn't add up. When you get millions and millions, and over 10 years, you already got over $100 million, and but yet the problems are still there. And I do agree. I do sympathize the fact that you don't have enough people, to maintain all these systems, and at the same, because 20 people, 30 people, how are you going to keep them working 24 hours a day to maintain all your system, to inspect all of your system? It's impossible. I understand do more with less, but that's more than I understand what you guys can give. And I sympathize for you with that. It's just the people just want to know, when can we pay? When can we start paying lower rates? But it's impossible to pay lower rates when you cannot fix the 60%. and you cannot upgrade, the dilapidated equipment, because most of the money is trying to fix issues that are not, it seems like we're putting duct tape and bubble gum, and I do, appreciate that now that we have, hopefully this, meters all over the place, but then comes with that metering all over the place that requires more manpower, to maintain and troubleshoot and operate.
Yeah, I'd like to make one statement. The grants that we get, 0% goes toward O&M. The ratepayers have to pay for O&M. If the ratepayers had to pay for these hundreds of millions of dollars that we get for grants and improvement in our system, your rates would be much, much higher. And we are fortunate that the EPA and other government agencies see that the need is here and that they are willing to fund the capital improvement projects. We weren't so fortunate in California at any city I worked for. We were lucky to get $1 million in 10 years. All it had to be our ratepayers paying it. And yes, our ratepayers paid a much higher cost for the water than our customers here pay. So the customer should, they're fortunate. And hopefully these government grants will continue to make the much needed improvements. Not only is the water corrosive, the atmosphere is corrosive on an island, the salt water. Look at your vehicles. They don't last as long as they would back in the States, and where you have a desert climate. So we pay the price for living in the beautiful island here in Saipan.
Congressman.
So we do understand that, but the grant doesn't provide for the O&M. What we're trying to figure out is that the millions of dollars that you've gotten over a decade, hundreds of millions of dollars that you've gotten over a decade, and we're still having a lot of issues. And yes, the water's corrosive and whatnot. There has to be a solution. I mean, I understand, and of course that operation and maintenance, O&M, doesn't get funded through that. And that is where I guess the issue is, because you don't collect enough, because you don't charge the proper rate of water. The cost of service of providing that water is not funded through the grant. It's only provided to, install new piping, buy new water pumps, provide new meters, for the valves. But it's not technically for your technicians to go out there and actually, perform your maintenance and operations, stuff like that. And that is still costing, a lot of money, because doing all of those maintenance is not cheap. And of course, the older the system, the more expensive it is to, replace those parts to accommodate that old system. And you guys just need new parts, but then, the smart meter evidently isn't so smart. So we're just trying to figure out what, you guys need, especially as, PUT side, where, we understand that maybe one day we get money somewhere, we could divert some of it. I mean, it's not allowed by law yet to give CUC any money, but we have to find a way on how to make CUC operate, better, to provide funding for your O&M, because we don't understand grant that doesn't give for our O&M. So it just boggles the mind that over $100 million in the past decade, and we still have this issue. That's what, people are trying to figure out. So it seems like, people are starting to say that maybe the money isn't the problem. And this is not to put fault on you guys, because this thing has been going on before your time. You guys just got here like what, yesteryear, and this thing's been going on for decades. So it just so happened that you're in the hot seat, and everybody's looking at you guys, and everybody's like, "Arr!" And when we sympathize, and there's just somehow, some way, there's not, something is not clicking, something is not meshing with the way you guys are created, the way CUC is created to operate as a business. But for some reason, it's not operating as a business, because you guys should be money generating entity. As a utility, anywhere you go in the world, a utility is a revenue generating entity. But for some reason, we're just not there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Can I give the opportunity to Mr. Sarak, who's been here all day? If you have any concern that you want to ask or bring up this time, Mr. Attorney?
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing now. I'm listening, but perhaps after we get done, I may have a comment or two. But for right now,
All right,
I
thank you.
have nothing. Thank you.
But thank you for your patience and for joining us today. Senator Corina?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarification. So Saipan loses 100 million gallons per month. What about Rhoda and Tinian? Do they have similar issues that Saipan has? Are they?
Tenya has similar issues with the unaccountable or non-revenue water. And I'm going to be making a trip down there to assess it and see where we can help. Rota, not quite as much. They have a lot higher quality water that counts for a lot. So their water is, a great quality.
Subsidizing Saipan, right?
Would you happen to know though what those numbers are for Tinian, at least the non-revenue loss?
Yeah, I can get that. I don't have it with me today.
Okay. And then the 17 accounts that you were referencing, are those active accounts?
Yes, they are active accounts, and they are paying a fixed rate, and we're actively pursuing putting meters on those accounts.
I'm just curious, has anyone done an analysis of what the potential loss is because of the fixed rate?
Not those particular, because when their rates were set at a fixed rate, it was set for say if it's one house, it was set at the normal usage of a house or residence.
Okay, and one last one, Chair. I noticed that you use California a lot as a comparison to our island, and you had stated earlier that the rate in California is a lot higher than what we pay here. I'm curious, how much higher is California?
Well, each city is different.
Okay, so in reference to the one that you are pointing out to.
For
that you are
instance,
using.
for 1,000 gallons, the high rate would be $10 or more.
$10 or more. And I guess I'm just curious because yes, they may pay a higher rate in those areas in California that you are referencing to, but they could also drink the water probably, and they could do a lot with the water compared to what we have here. We're paying water, but yet we're still buying water to cook with, to drink with, so I just don't want to lose that in this discussion that we should be happy, we should be grateful that we are paying lower rate, because I'm not sure what the rate is in Guam, but their water is potable, right? So to make that kind of statement is just kind of like, I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, we also incur additional costs on top of what we're paying for a service that we shouldn't be buying extra water just so that we can drink or just so we can cook with. The
And-
water is good enough to shower, and that's about it. At
And
least here on Saipan.
even in California, where the water's high quality and good to drink, I'd say a large percent of the population still buys bottled water just like you do, because they've been sold that it is safer and better for them to buy bottled water and drink it than water from the tap.
Sure, and a lot of that is by
Mm.
preference, right? In here, it's really not a preference. It's whether you drink out of the tap water, which contain, which is only treated good enough to shower with, but not be able to use it for cooking or drinking
Yes,
water.
and that's because to get the water quality from the high chloride you have here, the salt levels, will take a reverse osmosis treatment plant. And with the PFAS in our water, the cost for the treatment of the way we're treating it now with the JAC is going to become astronomical, because the level for the maximum contaminant level is going to be decreased from 70 part per trillion to 4 part per trillion. The last couple months ago, we changed out the media in our at our 10 well sites that have GAC treatment at a cost of $500,000 just to change it out. That cost to replace that granulated activated carbon increased from the previous time we got it. And now that the EPA has proposed this new MCL, that cost is going to go up because of supply and demand. Because even in the States, they have PFAS. They have to treat it. We won't have an option but to treat and to lower that MCL down to a non-detect level. The best available technology to do that is reverse osmosis. So to treat 3 million gallon a day, would 3 to 5 million gallon a day will cost $100 million plus for the treatment plant alone.
So that's where it
Hopefully
gets-
we will be able to find some grants to pay for that.
Yeah.
Once we have removed the chlorides from the water, it will not be so corrosive. It won't attack our water meters as much. People will start being able to drink it from the tap. But we're not there yet, but that's our long-term goal.
Right. And I hear everything that you're saying, and I completely understand. I guess just based on everything that you have said, it sounds like there's going to be some huge challenges ahead to even resolve the issues with SO1, right? Because cause it's going to cost us, like so much money just to be able to provide that safe drinking water, but it's going to cost us an arm and a leg. I don't know how we're going to resolve the issue with SO1.
Yeah, the JAC is not a SO1. That's EPA mandated nationwide
Okay,
level.
got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Just as
Thank you, Chair. Recognize the director first, Chairman.
as an update, we had about 167 items on the SL on the S stipulated order. Yeah. Sorry, 67. Yeah. I might be wrong with this number by 1 or 2 numbers, but we had about 67 items on the stipulated order 1. That's 67, and we're down to about 9. Yeah. We're down to 9 items to resolve,
Line item.
and the SWIMS program is addressing one of them. We are currently and actively trying to recruit for the positions. That's another item on the SO. The procurement regulations is with the board. That's another SO matter. And the FOG program is ongoing right now. We've implemented that a few months ago, and that's going very well. We're doing outreach to the commercial establishments that need to be informed about how they dispose of their fats, oils, and grease. And we're working on we have some preliminary already drafts and approvals from EPA on some of the plans that we have, the master plan. And then following by that would be the strategic financial plan, which would then require us to submit our our rate petitions to CPUC. So there's quite a lot going on, and the last 9 remaining items on the stipulated order is basically the goal of these task committees that have been formed to address them in separately from the operations that's trying to address customer needs and leaks. And so we did have a presentation that we presented to the governor, and we presented it as well to I think it was a couple of legislators who mentioned that they would let us know when there be a joint meeting for us to present it to the legislatures. So if you are
You can provide us that.
eager to
person.
listen to the presentation, then
Oh, okay.
you can schedule that another time, and we'll be more than happy to come and show you all the projects that's ongoing. We have a PowerPoint presentation on that, how it's funded, what's the amount of each project, and how it's going to benefit the CNMI. So whenever you're
Okay, that's exactly what we were trying to get at, and
Yes,
so
yes.
we'll set up another date with
All right.
members. But
Thank you.
let me ask, other than the 130 million or 150 million, are we getting significant grants for power?
On the power side, we are
What's the
Uh,
total that we're getting from the Biden infrastructure money?
right now it's going through the grants management office, but we are working on some proposals, mostly for consultants and rate and studies on the grid, and that's being drafted up now. But we've set up a meeting for a consultation with the um, Department of Energy under the IRA program to see if we could get some we're in pursuit of loan guarantees for the power plant so that we could get that out of the way and start focusing on the renewables. It's kind of difficult to go that route when we don't know what our plant's going to look like at the time we're ready for it. So, as you know, the power plant is old. We lost an engine not too long ago, so our capacity went down, and we are just holding enough reserve for any additional downtime of another engine. But we have an emergency procurement.
What's
to
our
purchase-
capacity now that you're producing?
I believe we're at 40. We have a capacity of about 45
But you're down
megawatt.
to.
Our peak is at 39.
uh,
I believe we're at 45, 46. So if one engine goes down, we'd be at
So,
cap, and that's
So, members this morning were mentioning about renewable energy. Um, with that reserve there, you have up to 80 megawatts, but they're all down. You mean, and now you're producing at 45?
no, we had 60 megawatts at one point, but most of it is, some of it is down. We have one engine that's going to come up around May, June of next year that will add on 10.8 megawatts.
So 70? No.
So no, 60 was the capacity we had, the highest capacity we had at one point. We're down to 46, 45, 46. And we're running at 39, 38, 39 right now.
And you're getting a 10 megawatt soon.
That will come up around June. We
June.
have an emergency procurement to get another engine, and that would be about a 6 megawatts. That's the
megawatt.
plan. We are currently using Power Plant 4 and Power Plant 2, which are very inefficient, very old and inefficient. But at this point, we need to run those because without those, we would not have sufficient capacity. And so, in order to, we are doing some studies and planning on the renewables, but it's difficult to concentrate on that when your power plant, which would be your base load, is basically running under an emergency, is not reliable at this time. So similar to Rhoda as well, Saipan is under that same situation. So.
So Rhoda, on Rhoda, the emergency generator is coming also?
That is being reviewed now. There's a lot of inquiries from potential suppliers of that engine, and the crew have been meeting daily to address all the questions so we could finalize it and get the proposals in and get that engine on its
So
way.
several vendors have responded.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And there is the Cummins engine that the mechanic is
Working on?
and trying to cannibalize from another Cummins engine, and he thinks that'll be done by. It was about within 20 days, and it's been a week.
What about Rhoda Resort generators?
Rotor Resort is has a lot of moisture, chair, so it's gonna take 2 months minimum, if not.
Are you working on it?
We're prioritizing the Cummins engine
Okay.
because we need that backup right away so that Rhoda has backup. Once the Cummins engine is up and running, then we will divert over to the Rotor Resort.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Chairman Ardon?
Thank you again, sir. And two things. So we could honestly be safe that we can retract the statement that CUC water is not potable, correct? CUC water is not potable, correct?
It is potable, per primary standards. It's only,
Wait, before we go any further, because we got to understand when you say potable, it's safe for consumption.
it is safe.
So you're telling me and the public that it's okay to drink CUC water and to cook CUC water instead of buying Saipan ice water. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. They're
And
just not palatable, which
It's-
means it tastes like salts.
it tastes like salt.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't meet all regulatory safety primary standards. That makes it
So it doesn't meet
Potable.
any what again?
for the MCLs. It meets all the standards
Well, and what standards are those?
set by the EPA
And
and
but the water has to
CNMI,
be
BECQ,
it has to be safe to be consumed.
and it is safe.
So when I hold a napkin under a faucet and it comes out rusty, are you saying that that's still safe to drink?
It's coming out rusty because you probably have rust in the pipes in your house.
But
and
I
the water is corrosive to
but I
the
but I run
fluorides.
PVC pipes, and it's still rust coming out.
It's not where I live.
All right. And then on another note, with the the grid system, back during the Garmin era, Saipan wise, the grid was able to withstand over 80 megawatts of power. Okay. Now we're only capable right now of producing maximum of 40, 45 megawatts, right? But we're only using about 35, 38 megawatts, correct? Now, so Public Law 1587, which encourages and actually pushes the public to go renewable. Why is CUC preventing residential customers from connecting their renewable energy resource? Because if the system is designed to carry a load of 80 megawatts, but a residential can only produce at the most, the people that can afford it, on average, about 50 to 80 kilowatts. It doesn't even make a dent in the grid. So why is CUC preventing residential from connecting the renewable. And if CUC is doing that, okay, because there's a lot of complaints about that, it is technically in violation of Public Law 1587. And I do also know that, through grants management, that CUC has received grant to conduct studies, right? But then again, under Public Law 1587, this is way back in 2008. Develop and implement a utility rate structure and independent power producer. But most of this is for businesses. But nothing in here mentions anything that prevents a residential to go renewable. Okay? Like I said, in fact, this law encourages every homeowner to use renewable, so that way the generators at CUC doesn't have to be operated and maintained so much, because it's not running as much, because it's not producing as much. So a lot of people are concerned about that. And I'm not trying to place blame on anybody, because this is way before your time, as the managers and directors now. So what can we do to move forward to give the people the opportunity to maximize their ability to produce their own power? Because I am coming out with a bill, because I understand CUC is going through some financial difficulty like the rest of other government agencies. I'm introducing a bill to eliminate net metering, so that way CUC doesn't have to, credit anybody. And then at the same time, the credit that CUC does provide is not being subsidized by those residents that do not or cannot afford the renewable energy at this moment. So we're trying to figure out a way on how to help CUC, but yet to have CUC also help, the residential, because I'm pretty sure that if you guys can put your renewable energy in your house, you would, right? Especially with the way the cost of, FAC and LEAC and all of those, costs is hurting everybody. Because at the end of the day, every single one of us that is sitting in this building or in this chamber is paying that price. So I'm trying to see what can we do, on our end, at least in the House's end, working together with, the Senate to encourage CUC to push, residential, give them the opportunity to go renewable. And at the same time, whatever excess energy would be given to you at no cost to you. Thank you.
Director?
I could let that go as a comment, but um, yeah, I believe you're right that the law doesn't cap the how do you say it? The amount of solar PVs that a residential customer could have. In fact, I only learned that more recently. But what I understand is that, and I'm just gonna say what I believe, what I am told. There was a discussion of the fact that there needed to be a study done on the actual system to make sure that putting a full load for all these houses that were coming up was not going to be detrimental to the system itself, because that would be more uh, damaging for the customers with the solar PVs as well, because then if the system is not capable of carrying it, then at the time. So my understanding was there was supposed to be an analysis done, and I don't think that ever happened. um I don't know why it never happened, but the board did pass a resolution, I want to say in 2014, that restricted us from for residentials to carry at 70% until the study was done. I don't think there's a study, because I was asking if we ever did the study, because I wanted to see where that study was. So but definitely going to look into it and get more answers. But you're right. I mean, if we need low, why not get the renewables? Why not get these renewables to feed into the grid, right? But at the same time, I think CUC is losing a lot of, is hurting more with regards to the cost, because at the way the public law is written on the compensation, it's 1-for-1 and includes the fuel portion up until the reconciliation period where you give back only 50% of the fuel. But even the 50% itself is giving it back when the consumer did not use fuel to produce its energy, is a cost to CUC and the rest of the consumers who are not using renewables. So that was one of the concerns, as well as the fact that this assessment on the system was supposed to be done. But that's something that we would look at. And if there is a new bill out there that Chairman for House PUTC says is out there, I would love to look at that, because if that's going to help us see what the impact is too going into the future, then that might change things. I'd like to see that draft if possible. Yeah, thank you.
Your citizen-centric report says that, your renewable energy, right, is at less than 1%. So that means that your grid, even if all from what my understanding is, and from the research that I've studied here in Saipan, in Rhoda, and in Tinian, as a matter of fact, that even if we were to connect all of those systems, it would not even reach 1 megawatt. So technically, your grid, which has been upgraded, since the Garmin era, because every typhoon and whatnot that comes by, lines got better, transformers got better. Just recently, the Chalankidza substation was upgraded, right? So technically, the system has been semi-upgraded, not the whole CNMI wide, but the fact that the residential customers can produce less than 1 megawatt of power, it shouldn't even affect the grid. Unless we're talking, according to the law, that, nobody can produce over 10 megawatts of power, you know what I mean, in residential, or private customer, then that means that CUC has a whole lot of leeway or space to get this renewable in there, at no cost to CUC. But at the same time, CUC should charge for the distribution and, the transportation of that power, because somebody has to maintain the grid. But yet it shouldn't be as much as maintaining a dilapidated, custom build parts, generator that is very inefficient, that for every, every megawatt or kilowatt of power that it produces, it consumes more, fuel, and wastes more oil, because it's inefficient. But yet you have this potential resource of power that a lot of residential customers are willing to provide, at no cost to you. But yet you could still charge for the distribution and the transfer, of that.
Chairman, I think Director and you're hearing from the lawmakers, and this is not the first time we talk about renewable energy. And, with some of us have been to CUC talking to the past director, and I know you haven't been there long, but I think the message is we want to see more renewable energy projects, and especially in the residentials and the net metering project. And coming from Rhoda, it's very critical project, because, as you know, bringing in the fuel to Rhoda sometimes present challenges when the weather is not cooperating, and the vessels sometimes have to be put off their arrival, and so it's a good project for especially for Rhoda also. So I know that CUC has talked about it and discussed it, and but I think we need to go to another level here and really try to see what we can do now. You mentioned earlier you have somebody at CUC that is heading a division in renewable energy. Who is that person, and when did he got on board, or he or she?
We have two renewable energy engineers, and they're getting trained a lot. They're not we didn't hire them already as experts of renewable energy, but they are getting a lot of training on renewable energy, and they are electrical, so they understand the requirements of the whatever projects on the table. They can assess it. However, as I told
It
you
seems
earlier,
like
I have
CUC
a-
needs to get a consultant or somebody, right? To
we are in the process of doing that, and in fact we have openings also for renewable energy. We do have a vision to transition into clean energy sooner than later. We have today I have to reschedule my meeting with our hired consultant who's working on our IRP, integrated resource plan, that is supposed to give us our feedback on the renewable and alternative energy that is in the best interest of CUC and the CNMI. Mr. Watson here is familiar with renewable energy on the water wastewater side as well, as he's brought up the anaerobic digest that he's experienced in the anaerobic digestion system as well. And considering we have two sewer treatment plants, that is something that we talked about. We already talked with FEMA about it. We've put in an application for through the BRIC grant program. So we are pursuing renewable energy. Maybe we're a little mumming about it because you don't want to get too excited, and then, it it doesn't go your way. Funding is the ultimate issue, but studies are very important to make sure it's done right. And as this moves along, we are also going to meet with the Department of Energy to see what we can get from them, what loan guarantees we can get from them to help us move into renewable energy. And we already met with one of the, Diesel Emission Reduction Act representative, and she's given us direction also on some of the grants that we could avail of to avail of these funding that would help us get to renewable energy. As you know, we don't have money's just sitting for us to say, hey, we want to go to this project, so we got to do it in a way where we're working with federal agencies to give us that funding assistance. It is our vision to transition, and if it could be done in a year, you'll see it next year. But it takes time to get these studies done on the grid and on the system. And there's already a study done for the solar power, for example. But the IRP is what we're waiting for, so that the IRP will guide us as to the direction of how much renewable we need, and what blend we need for the CNMI for Rhode and Tinian. And today at 3:00 we were supposed to meet to see the first draft and provide some additional input that they requested for. I rescheduled it because we're still here, so I was messaging them, telling them I'll call them when I get out. But we are moving forward, and we appreciate your support on that.
Back to the public law that our congressman mentioned, that was in the 16th legislature. You mentioned about study. I don't know I'm wondering whether from that time they never study to to go into renewable energy. And I remember back then it's supposed to be by 2020, 2012, we're supposed to be on the renewable energy. I want to ask because I know it's going to affect. This is my just an assumption that it's probably will affect the operation for CUC employment and financially will be affected because I know back in Tinian, I was pushing for some of the residents that are requesting to be approved because I think they apply on this Micronesian renewable energy that they're under solar and hook and they were requesting to be hooked up to the grid. And it took a couple of months before they assist this individual, and I learned that it is because the the island of Tinian don't have the bigger company that will subsidize the operation. So is that part of the why we're not under renewable energy because of financial is going to have a financial impact on CU's operation?
I don't know about the Tinian incident, for example, if how that was decided upon. Um, what I know is that whatever renewable energy we go into, most likely we will still need the power plant to run, right? And we have to make sure that we can run at a capacity where when we're getting renewable energy in, we're running low enough but large enough to pick up should a cloud passes over for solar, for example. On Tinian, as we discussed also the other day, even just the underground, we were concerned about running that one large engine, for or two large engines for the island, for example, and have very little demand or load going out. That would damage your engine, is what the engineers are saying. So, hence we need smaller engines. And so, here at the plant, if we run 10 megawatt but renewables coming in, is that going to be the concern? Do we need to buy smaller units to be able to support these renewable projects? And so these are some of the things that have come on the table, and some of the questions we've asked also with the representatives from these agencies is, when the time comes to transition into the renewable, will they fund the smaller units that we need as baseload? Because it's not that easy to just pull up $2 million to buy, a 1 megawatt engine, or, for example, even for Rhoda. So these are the questions we have: is how do we fund these engines at the same time we integrate renewable energy? Because at the end of the day, the power plant is still our saving grace, right? We still need to have that power plant up. Another topic came up is the virtual power plant, so that when our engines are running, it's being stored. And then we can actually shut down the plant and use the virtual power plant to source when the clouds come by or whatever. And that helps with emission control as well. So there's a lot of discussion that we've had. We definitely know we're going to do solar. That seems to be the most obvious one. But, at what capacity? Is 20 megawatts too much? Or too little, or and how much should we split it up? We're hoping for this consultant, which we've put in the grants for already, the requests, that we could get these questions answered, because we need an expert to tell us what direction we're going to go, so we could put in these applications that would help us get the funding for it, or even put out for IPPs or whatever we feel is going to be the best for the CNMI, whatever we feel is the best to lower the rates. We're a small dent to the clean environment, right? But I think the bigger concern is getting the rates down. And so it's not going to make sense for us to pursue these projects if it's not going to reduce the rates for the consumer. Even more not going to make sense if it's going to raise the rates. So, because solar renewable energy doesn't mean lower rates. It just means you don't burn fossil fuel, right? So in our case. And so we have to make sure that that's the case for us, is that the rates are going to go down, because that should be the objective, because it doesn't make sense to go renewable if our consumers are going to pay more. And so these studies have to be done to meet that objective.
Thank you for that information. And regarding Tinian, we don't have any problem with CUC telling us that we need this because it's required. But the problem there is they never tell us. If we know that we're aware from the start, we will request from NMHC to have that small unit. But we don't know. We've been talking to the engineers and the key staff of CUC, but that was never mentioned. And what bothers us is we're moving forward and then there's a roadblock. So now we have to adjust which area will be cut down from extending that underground. But if we know from the start, we will request from NMHC. So that's why NMHC mentioned that that's the only amount that is awarded, because that small unit was not mentioned from the start. So we don't have any problem with that. The only thing that we're very concerned is roadblock, because this has been discussed over 3 years, and we want to push forward.
Yeah, I
For this one.
apologize about that.
Thank you.
I wasn't aware that wasn't discussed either. So when we got the RFP draft from NMHC, that's when the question came up, because we had not seen any of the scopes, but we learned later on that a previous director had seen it, and again, we're coming in at the tail end, and unfortunately the question still needed to be asked. However, it's okay to say the engine. So we submitted a grant for the engine for the Tinian underground. We submitted that grant a couple of days ago. Was it? Yeah, a couple of days ago. And so when it gets to the next phase, maybe we'll need a support letter coming from the delegation to support that grant. Thank you.
Director, I know we're trying to wrap this up, but before I forget, since the chair is here for PUC, wouldn't whatever decision you make with regards to renewable energy and projects have to be approved also by PUC now that they have quorum? And I mean, you were talking about how if we pursue a project, it might mean higher rates for the consumer. Wouldn't that have to be approved also by PUC?
I would think any contract that's above 350 or 350 and above goes to the CPUC for their review and approval. Anything that would impact the rates at that level. So if we award a contractor a contract that's 350 or higher, it would have to go to CPUC first for their approval before the award is made.
Okay. And that goes for infrastructure money, right? The 150 million, for example, if you sign contracts for those, even though they're federal grants, they have to approve it still, right?
May I answer that, Chairman?
Chairman?
For federal grants, there's no requirement to come to us, as I understand it right now, because that's not impacting the rates.
Well, she just finished saying if they have a solar project, it might impact the rate.
If any contract that they contract for, including emergency contracts that are over $350,000, those contracts are required to come to the Public Utility Commission for approval. If there was no quorum, that amount would go from 350 to 1 million. But so we've had this discussion last month with CUC. But if they get federal monies for a federal grant contract, that's not a rate. That's not a contract that would affect the rate. So if they get a contractor to put in water lines or put in their water filter system, that's all federally funded. It's not money that comes technically out of the coffers of CUC, those coffers being filled by rate money. If it's all federal money, then right now, the way our order is structured, there's no requirement for them to come to PUC for approval of getting a contractor to do, for example, their water filter work.
let's say they're running on a generator that costs X amount, and they decide to replace that with federal grant to another generator that's less efficient, wouldn't you have a right to say, no, that's gonna cost more, even though it's not their money, it's a federal money, but they're replacing an existing generator with an inefficient generator for some reason. Maybe they want to give to their friends
Mhm.
a contract. So you mean to tell me you don't have a say as to
As
After
for
that
the
decision?
approval of the purchase of the contract, probably not. But I think at some point in time, whether it comes on a rate petition or another review of rates, we would have the ability to say, well, wait a minute, you're not going to be able to increase these rates because you put in an inefficient engine. But I think you've raised a good point, and I haven't thought about it in that respect. But I know that what I've read so far from our orders that require PUC contract approval and procurement approval, if it's federally funded, and I'm just using that blank across.
or
word, it's
or
federally
for
funded.
example, this is a significant amount, the 150 million, and I'm concerned how that will be used down the years,
Yeah.
because if they have a procurement setup that's not very efficient, then it's costing the consumers, right? So you have a right to kind of like warn them or something, right? That, hey, the way you're doing it, when you're not doing it competitively and you're just doing sole sourcing, you might want to say, hey, we have a concern here. It's costing us more, right?
We would certainly look into that, I think, and obviously we would hear about that some way. And I understand what you're saying, and we'll keep our eyes out for that.
Okay.
I mean, it's something that we will have discussions with CUC, I think, at some point in time. As I indicated, we're going to be dealing with certain issues with CUC that are currently pending in January and February. When we get some payment of our assessment billings, I say that with a smile because I sent out an assessment to
So they're
CUC.
giving you 150 million, or what was your budget?
That would be nice if they came across.
Anyways,
But anyway, I will keep that in mind. I think you've raised a good point, and I haven't. That idea hasn't come across my mind, but it certainly is in there now, and I will continue to think about that.
thank you, consider. Since we're meeting again, I guess on the CIP projects and on your master plan, right? So-called. I want to thank but I guess the chairman. Okay, I'll go one round to the chair, senator first. I mean, congressman.
So when are we actually going to start doing this study for the grid? And when can we start breaking ground? Because from my understanding from OGM is that the money is already there for CUC to conduct a grid study to implement renewable. The last time I spoke to him, he informed me that CUC has already got approved for 2 grants to conduct the rate study. And then the other one is, knowing the fact that, like, let's say, for example, for Tinian customers, right? There's no way that anybody there can create, or even if you put 10 houses, 20 houses, can create over 1 megawatts of power on if they go green. So when can they start going green? And the same with Rhoda, because their population is a lot smaller and not everybody has, renewable or cannot afford renewable. But those that do can, when can they actually start implementing that so that at least it gives somebody somewhere, somehow, a start? And for us over here, when can they start, connecting to the grid? Because some of them have already invested in these equipment, but yet they're not connected, and they lost money because CUC was not able to connect them, or it doesn't want to connect them, even though they're not even going to make a dent in the grid. So when can they start connecting? Thank you, sir.
Director, you want to answer that? Tomorrow?
Sure.
But that's a good point because, for example, Road and Tinian can start, right? They're not going to impact the system immediately. But I guess the grid study and any scheduling.
So the IRP is supposed to be completed in end of February, I think, early March. But from what I heard today is they have the draft already, the first draft, and they wanted to present that. So they're that was good news for us. I'm hoping to I'll be able to reschedule that tomorrow. If not, it'll be Friday. But that would take us to, I guess, providing whatever's missing so they could finish the final version and give us that back. That study will then tell us what our project really is going to be, the magnitude of it, whether it's going to be a 20 megawatt solar or less, whether it's a combination of solar and another renewable or so it's even going to tell us about the power plant because that's all supposed to be in this plan. And so from there we'll have a better timeline of things and also objectives of our 5-year timeline that we're working on. And so I can't give you a date of when the groundbreaking will be.
Okay. Senator Corina?
Thank you, Chairman. I know we're trying to wrap up, but I would really like to address three things before we end our hearing today, Chairman. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the safety of our drinking water. So again, Deputy, I just want to be clear, and I would like the viewing public to hear straight from you that the water that CUC provides is in fact safe to consume, despite where you are on the island.
Yeah. When it is not safe, we put out public notices. For instance, we recently put out a public notice, public advisory for PFAS levels that exceeded the 70 part per trillion. And we advised the public in that area not to drink or cook with that water.
Okay. But aside from that, when tests are done, the water that comes out of the faucet of every home is safe to drink and consume.
Yes, but as you point out, most of the people won't drink the water because of the taste. It is throughout the island going to have high chloride level, which is salt from the sea. And it's not going to be palatable.
Sure. So aside from the water being not palatable, it is safe.
Yes,
Okay.
and when it's not, then we put out
Okay.
a public advisory.
Okay. And I bring this up because I find it concerning, even probably alarming, that when Rep. Don brought up his water, the water that comes out of his faucet, it sometimes has rust. I was kind of surprised about your response to that because you didn't seem concerned. And in fact, you had mentioned that, well, maybe your piping is rusty. And he obviously said it's not because he uses, what is it? PVC.
Mhm.
And so the rust must be coming from someplace else. So let me ask you this then. Can you confidently say that the pipes that run along everywhere on the island, the CUC provides water through, is not rusty?
No, we do have rusty pipes. We have iron pipes out the system. We have some ductile
So-
irons, and they develop leaks and
Okay.
have to be repaired.
So instead,
That rust will come off, especially with changes in pressure. But rust is a secondary standard. It is not considered to be for us to put out a notice to say it is unsafe.
okay,
The question was, is the water safe per regulatory?
okay,
And that was my answer.
okay. So
Just
this-
because the water's turbid or rusty does not mean it's unsafe.
Got it. Okay. I just want to be clear with that because, we're always looking out for our people's safety. Obviously, that's first and foremost. So I just want to make sure that the message that we are conveying out there is that the water is safe to consume. Now, what about because, we get so many different calls for so many different reasons. And one of the other complaints is that the water sometimes smells like sewage.
Okay, that I've ran across throughout everywhere I've worked. Most of the time, that smell is coming from the drain in your sink. And you just need to put a couple tablespoons of household bleach in that, and the odor will go away.
Okay.
It's just that when you turn on the faucet sink, it comes up.
Okay.
And that's a common occurrence.
Okay.
I would like to point out that the turbidity levels in Rota's water during rain events increases to above the secondary standards. When that occurs, we put out a public advisory for them not to drink the water or cook with it.
Okay.
Boil water notice.
And the public appreciates that because you guys are the subject experts of the water. So thank you for always putting out those notices and informing the public that it needs to be boiled before using it to either cook or drink, right? The next item that I would like to address, Chairman, is Public Law 19-59. I don't know, Director Terlai, if you are familiar with that particular public law, but Devin, if you would please just put it up on the screen for viewing. Basically, this law was passed back in 2016, August of 2016, and the purpose of this law was to require all public land leases to include a condition that the lessees must connect to and use the CUC power grid. Now, we are talking about ways to lower the rates, and this particular law actually, if we look at on page 1, line 6, starting on line 6, right, or actually line 4. If I'll just read it out for the record, but the under findings and purpose, since the stabilization of the power grid and the increase in power production megawatts, some hotels and businesses continue to use their generators to provide power to their establishment. This has resulted in high power costs for the existing customers on the CUC power grid because the small power users are paying for the fuel and maintenance of the power plant engines. The legislature finds that one way to reduce the cost of the power is for most, if not all, power users to connect to the CUC power grid. Now we move on to page 2. And if I may just read lines, I'll just read from line 2. The lessee may be exempt from the condition required to use the CUC power grid if CUC determines that the existing power capacity is incapable of providing the additional power load required by the proposed new development. This public land lease condition will spread out the cost of power generation among all the power customers and generate more funds necessary to upgrade, improve, and maintain the CUC power systems. Accordingly, the purpose of this legislation is to mandate that all public land lease be subject to a condition that the lessee connects to and uses the power grid of CUC for the duration of the lease, subject to CUC's evaluation and determination regarding the power requirements. I'm just curious, this was passed in last 16. Has CUC promulgated regs to enforce this law? If are you aware?
I don't think we promulgated any new rules to enforce that, but I do know that most of the hotels, there's only one that I'm aware of that is not connected to CUC's grid, and they had wanted to connect at the time, but there were some issues, and so when we had asked them to hold off, what they did was they went and got a contract
Right.
for their fuel, and so when we were ready to connect, they had asked us now to hold because they already contracted with their fuel supplier. Now, we probably need to get an update on that as to if their fuel contract is
Sure.
complete, but I'm only aware of one. The rest of the larger establishments of public lands are connected, as far as I know, are connected to CUC's grid.
Can we just,
They may not be all using it 100%.
Yeah.
Like I'm aware of one hotel that runs their generator because their usage is very minimal right now with the low tourism, visitors.
Mhm.
And so for that reason, they're going on their generator right now. But I do know that I'm only aware of one again at the end of the day. Yeah.
And I'm bringing this up because I mean we're trying to find ways to lower the rates, right? And obviously, if we, based on the findings on this particular bill, if all the hotels, the large ones, are connected to CUC grid, then it would greatly help spread the cost. I do, in speaking with one of the management in one of the larger hotels up north, they did say that they were, they would like to be connected to CUC as much as possible, but the CUC just doesn't have the capacity to even put them on, because as soon as they go on, it affects the grid, and then it causes instability or something to that effect, right? And so I'm curious whether or not, especially now, I think you just said that we used to be at a capacity of 60 megawatts, and we're down to 45, and then at peak it goes up to like 39, our usage, right? So there's not that much room for if something should happen, lo and behold, we don't have the capacity to keep.
Which is why I wouldn't push on that, because we actually have the list of hotels connected so that we could, if we needed to, worst case scenario would be
Right.
to ask one of them to go offline. I'm not aware of a hotel that's not connected to our grid in the north. Maybe they're connected, just not online.
Maybe partially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I bring, the reason why I bring this is because if you read further into the bill, right, and you go down to lines 18, it actually gives CUC the authority and the autonomy. It says, if necessary, the lessee may be required to provide and pay for improvements and upgrade to the power grid as necessary to meet the additional power load of the proposed development. So it's almost like an out, or some kind of assistance from these developers to help pay for upgrades and the maintenance of the system. So I don't.
It would be like large transformers and things
So
like that.
I'm just, if we're trying to find ways to make improvements at the power plant, or just whatever other that they could help with, this is definitely a mechanism
Yeah.
to do that. So that's why I'm bringing this up.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
And then the last one, Chair, I would really like to talk about the FAC rate, and that seems to be an issue that's been coming up for so long that I, as far as I could remember. But Mr. Sarek has provided the committee with a copy of a PowerPoint slide, which is just a working draft. But in one of the pages on this PowerPoint, it talks about the elements of, the FAC, and one of them being the allowance for doubtful accounts. And earlier, when we were talking to Mr. Sarek, I asked the question whether or not this particular line item that's embedded on the bill is legal. And the reason why I ask is because this is a mechanism to collect on allowance for doubtful accounts, right, for bad debt expense. And when customers apply for service with CUC, I'm not sure if they're being told or even asked to give consent to pay for this particular line item on the bill. And this is why I ask whether or not this line item on the FAC element is legal. I do see that it's according to this PowerPoint slide, where is it? The rate that's assigned to that particular line item is 7%. I don't know if that's still the case to date. So I am really, really concerned about this particular line item on the fact rate, because if it is not legal, obviously it's illegal, and that would make it a crime, right? And I just want to make sure that our customers are protected and they are not paying for something that they are not aware of, right? Because that would be theft. And so I just want to pose this question, I guess, to you as the acting executive director. What is your position on that particular line item?
Are you referring to the allowance for bad debt, like doubtful
Yes,
accounts?
the doubtful accounts. Yes.
What is illegal about that?
That it's embedded on the bill without the people's knowledge and consent to pay for something that's has nothing to do with the price of doing business. That's a completely separate expense that any other business would set aside, right? It's an allowance for debt that they feel that they won't be able to collect. But by embedding that onto the bill itself, you are asking the people, the customers, to pay for something that's really not associate as it's an expense associated with providing the service.
I'm a little baffled with how is it not associated with the cost of doing service? It's very much
Because
associated with it.
okay, so an example of doing business, right, with would be employees working at CUC, right? The linemen out there doing the work as whatever they need to do for the grid, water, the water. So allowance for bad is more on the administrative side. It's an administrative fee, so to speak, and it's captured on the financial statement. Right, it's already reflected on the financial statement, and to put it on the bill and charge people and collect on it, I feel like I don't know. I posed the question just to make sure that it's not improper, it's not illegal.
Maybe I can explain
Okay.
why it's in there.
Okay.
So the fuel adjustment charge methodology, which everything was done publicly, there were public hearings and all this. So to correct the statement that the consumers are not aware of it, it's been transparent before the rate was approved and implemented and made effective. So to make it clear, it's like the adjustment charge allows CUC to recover the cost of fuel that we use to generate the power production, to produce power.
Mhm.
In any case, you never get 100% payment back from your consumers. So the portion that is fuel related has to be recovered back to be able to say you are 100% fuel recovered. It is a cost of business that there's always a percentage of not employees, a percentage of customers that will forever never pay their bill. That percentage has to be factored back into the fuel rate so that we're recovering 100% of the fuel costs. Otherwise, we're not recovering 100% if we allow that portion to go unpaid.
But
And
the
so
fuel rate
that's why
is
we're
is
putting it
one
back
for
in.
one, right? You spend $10 million for fuel, right? And so the recovery rate should be one for one. Customers should pay, whatever that portion of the 10 million is. And I do see that we have other elements on there that are tacked on there. So I see fuel and lube. Yes, I agree that customers should pay that because that's the cost of doing business by paying for the fuel. But allowance for bad debt, like we already sorry, I keep saying we. CUC has a collections department that attempts to go after accounts that are delinquent, and so it's almost the appearance is that it's almost double dipping, right? Because you're charging the customers to collect on these allowances, right, for bad debt, and then you're also going after customers again to collect on their delinquent bills. So
It is a very small percentage of the allowance portion that is attributed to the fuel. Now, those numbers were worked with the consultants at the CPUC level and CUC's consultants. But even if we have a collection department, even as aggressive as they can be,
Mhm.
there's cases where you can't collect,
Right.
like from a
Uh,
dead person
right.
or a company that has dissolved and is bankrupt,
Right.
or even individuals that go bankrupt, um, or non-resident workers that don't pay their last bill and move off island.
Sure.
That fuel portion has to be recovered because our rules say we have to be 100% cost recovered. Fuel adjustment charge has to take that portion that will never be paid, because no matter how aggressive your collection department is, they're not going to get paid for some bills that we go after, right? Which we rightfully should. So there's no double dip here because it's such a small amount that it doesn't really, we have to keep reconciling it to make sure that we're actually recovering from accounts that never get paid.
But isn't, part or like on the financial statements already reflecting a line item they're capturing, right? Recording all the allowance for bad debt anyway.
The allowance for bad debt on the financial statements is prepared for financial statements requirements, but how it's factored into the fuel adjustment charge is not necessarily how it's reflected in the financial statements, because those are two different things, completely two different things. The methodology under the fuel adjustment charge should be actual. It's just based what we billed,
Mhm.
what fuel we used, and then the difference, and then you take into account the what's not been paid and then you work from there. But what's on the financial statements is taking in general all bad
Other
debt.
amounts.
And
Okay.
what we take into account on the fuel adjustment charge is simply the uncollectible portion of fuel
For the fuel.
that the consultants will determine the ratio that they feel should be factored back into the rate. The details of that ratio, I don't have. I wasn't privy to see those numbers back then, but
Okay.
I'm sure it's somewhere along, that we could look at it. But it's a lot more complicated than just taking. So the whole allowance for bad debt is not factored into the into the FAC rate. It is just it's just the fuel portion of the allowance that we feel will never be collected, even if you go after your collection aggressively. Yeah.
So thank you for that clarification, because that explains, just on the surface, right, when you read this without the context of how why it's even there in the first place. It can be very, what's the word?
It should maybe say allowance for fuel bad debt,
Yes,
and
yes.
that
Just
way
to
it's
be a little
not
bit more specific,
the
because
whole bad debt. Yeah.
to just an ordinary person looking at it, right, and not really understanding the background of it, it would lead to that assumption.
Sure.
So maybe just
And on the bill, we don't present it because even things like volatility,
Right.
over under, it gets confusing. But the complexity of the formula is to make sure that we are 100% full cost recovery on the FAC.
okay, which so going back okay, thank you for that clarification. I really do appreciate that. And just uh still on the same subject of fact, are we sorry, is CUC reconciling the fact rate every 6 months?
It's reconciled with CPUC, but since we haven't had a functioning commission at the time, we have not submitted our reconciliations. But it's a very simple reconciliation that accounting does whenever you need it, and that will be
Okay.
soon resumed if with CPUC. Yes,
Okay, and I just asked that because that was one of our conversations earlier today.
it is tracked
Yeah.
to date as to how much we've over or under recovered. I think we have an under recovered amount right now. Of the last time I saw was 4 million
So we do have an
under-recovered.
under recovered payments
of fuel.
of
Yes,
fuel. And is it because when that reconciliation was done, does it take into consideration the revenues that are sitting in the dispute account? or just based on what was collected, billed and collected?
The fuel recovery is, no, that's where the allowance comes in. So you don't look at disputes, you just look at what did we purchase and what was produced.
Right, but on the
What did we
dispute,
use in production?
the bills that are sitting in the dispute accounts are bills that were like revenues that were generated, right? So these are active accounts that are still sitting in there. And once they are resolved, right, then it comes out of their dispute bucket and it goes back into, it is now accounted for. So that would be factored into the calculation.
Yes.
But at the time when the reconciliation was being reconciled, it's taking out that disputed revenues because they're just sitting in there trying to be resolved.
Where's the revenue? So we are taking into account the revenue. Yeah. Yes, it's been taken into account.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarifications. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, just want to ask whether the water service fee is a standard amount of $10 a month, or there's different charges.
The water service fee is based on the size of your water meter. So for residential and most commercials, they're standard.
Standard is
Yes.
that. So
It's 10.
in case that individual or that resident requires a water service and they put a meter, do we still be charged with $10 even though there's no service or water service going to the resident? Is that how CUC bill customer even though there's no
There's
water
no,
consumption?
there's no, also, in other words, if a customer activated but doesn't use any water,
Yes,
do they still get charged?
$10.
Yes, they do, sir.
So for
Because we still have to monitor that meter. We still have to get readings. We still have to do our service.
also the cost that gasoline and
Yes,
the,
that's
the
included in the
everything.
$10.
So that's why you either you consume or not, you still get charged.
Yes, correct,
And
Senator.
I
Just
thought-
like the power also.
I thought
that's-
that when you first the initial application, you pay for that already, and only you get bill when you consume.
Yeah, you
I
only
don't-
get billed for the gallons when you consume. The cost of
Is that explained in
delivering-
the when an applicant apply for water or even power? Do CUC explain how you guys bill, or you just fill up application, connect, and then
the customer service are trained to answer that, but if they
no, but if they ask question, but
sure.
what I'm saying is when applicants apply, do they explain that to the consumer, or because that's why questions arise if
Sure.
they don't understand. The only time that they understand is when they complain. But do you guys have any kind of
I will make
ways
sure
of-
that there's at least maybe a brochure that shows them
yes?
the
So
rates are available on the counters, but it will make it a point to explain it.
thank you.
Thank you.
So move, Chair. I move to adjourn this public hearing.
Si tú sumas a todos.